The air was thick with dampness, the kind that clung to skin like a warning, and as Alex stepped deeper into the abandoned motel, the creaking floorboards beneath their boots sent hollow echoes through the empty corridors, each one swallowed by a silence that felt too deliberate, too watchful, as if the building itself was waiting, listening, breathing. The flickering neon sign outside the shattered lobby window casting sickly red light across peeling wallpaper, and dust-laden furniture frozen in time, untouched yet somehow disturbed, the stale scent of mildew and something faintly metallic filling Alex's lungs as they moved cautiously past the front desk where an ancient bell sat untouched, the register open but empty, the keys scattered like someone had left in a hurry but never finished, and then the whisper came, soft, barely there, just behind them, a breath against the nape of their neck though they were completely alone. The motel utterly abandoned, at least that was what they had thought until now, their pulse hammering as they turned swiftly, flashlight beam sweeping through the dimness, catching only floating dust motes, and the gaping dark of the hallway leading deeper into the structure, the numbered doors standing ajar just slightly, inviting, or warning, and as Alex's fingers brushed against the first door, the wood strangely warm beneath their touch, something shifted in the periphery, a shadow darker than the others, not moving but present, existing just beyond the edge of sight, and then the whisper again, clearer this time, a voice that was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but it knew their name, the sound slithering through the air, drawing them forward even as every instinct screamed to turn back, to run, but their feet carried them onward, step by step, breath by breath, down the hallway where the wallpaper seemed to peel in real time, curling like withering flesh. The air growing colder the further they went, the pressure building behind their eyes, as if something unseen was pressing against them, watching from the cracks between reality itself, and then the sound of a door clicking shut somewhere behind them, slow and deliberate, a presence making itself known, no longer content to remain in the periphery, no longer just watching, the weight of something unseen thick in the air, pressing against their ribs, their breath hitching as the hallways seemed to stretch impossibly long, the exit disappearing behind an expanse of flickering overhead lights that buzzed like dying insects, and then a single footstep, unmistakable, just around the corner ahead, something waiting, something knowing, something that had been here long before Alex had arrived and had no intention of letting them leave. Alex's breath came fast and shallow, their heartbeat a relentless drum against their ribs as the footstep echoed again, closer now, deliberate, almost taunting, and in the flickering light, the hallways seemed to pulse, shifting in a way that defied sense, the doors on either side warping, stretching, as if something unseen was pressing against them from the inside, straining against thin, rotting wood, waiting to be let out, or worse, waiting to let Alex in, and then the air changed, thickening, growing dense like water, making movement sluggish, as if invisible hands were gripping at their arms, their legs, slowing them down, forcing them to stay, and then the voice returned, whispering directly into their ear, though the hallway was empty, the sound impossibly close, curling around their spine like a cold breath from another world. "You shouldn't be here," it said, but not in warning. No, there was something else in its tone. Something patient, knowing, inevitable, and as Alex turned, their flashlight stuttering against the oppressive dark, the beam fell upon the floor, and their stomach lurched at what they saw. Footprints, damp, fresh, forming one by one as if unseen feet were walking toward them, closing the distance, step by step, and Alex staggered back, colliding with the wall, their pulse hammering as the light above them flickered wildly, the shadows stretching unnaturally, shifting with a will of their own, reaching. And then the door to their left groaned open, not slammed, not forced, but opened with quiet, calculated intent, revealing nothing but a gaping abyss of darkness inside, a darkness that breathed, and before Alex could react, a hand, cold, skeletal, impossibly long, emerged from the void and wrapped around the edge of the doorframe, fingers curling, tapping once, twice, a slow and deliberate beckoning, and the whisper came again, closer now, as if it was inside their own skull. "Come in." Alex's entire body locked up, their minds screaming at them to run, but their legs refused to move, their breaths shallow, chest high, as if the air itself had thickened into something unbreathable, and that hand, those impossibly long fingers, pale and glistening as if damp, remained motionless except for the slow, deliberate tapping against the doorframe, each tap sending a sharp jolt of dread straight into Alex's core, the whisper still lingering in their head, curling around their thoughts. "Come in," and then the floor beneath them creaked as if something unseen had shifted its weight, as if something else was in the hallway with them, watching, waiting, and suddenly Alex felt it, not a gust of wind, not the chill of the oppressive dark, but a breath, hot, rancid, brushing against the nape of their neck, so close, so real, and they knew if they turned around they would see something they weren't meant to, something that had been waiting in this place long before they ever stepped foot inside. So they clenched their eyes shut, forcing their limbs to move, but their feet barely scraped against the floor before the sound came again, closer, right in their ear. "Don't run," it murmured. "It's too late for that," and the hand at the doorframe curled inward, disappearing into the blackness beyond the doorway. But something else emerged, something just barely visible in the darkness, a shape shifting, unfolding, stretching upward. Impossibly tall, its movements sickly slow, deliberate, and Alex felt it in their bones, a pull, something deep and primal, something that made the very air tremble with its presence, and then the light died. Total, suffocating darkness swallowed the hallway, every instinct in Alex's body screaming at them to move, to fight, to do something, but the weight of the void was crushing, and then a sound, a whisper, but not a voice, not words, something far worse, a rustling, shifting noise, like something dragging itself across the walls, the ceiling, everywhere at once, and the cold touch of fingers grazed their wrist, light, almost gentle, as if testing them, feeling their warmth, their pulse, and then a sudden, jerking pull yanked them forward toward the open doorway, into the suffocating abyss beyond, and Alex gasped, clawing at the doorframe, fingernails scraping against the rotting wood, but the force was relentless, pulling, and then, just as their vision adjusted to the sheer blackness, just as their eyes began to see what waited beyond the door, it stopped. The pull vanished. The unseen grip disappeared. The breath at their neck gone. The silence, thick and deafening, settled around them like a tomb, and in that awful stillness, something shifted, not in the darkness, but behind them, in the hallway, in the space where nothing should have been, and before they could even turn, before their mind could process, the whisper returned, one final time, low, amused, "I just wanted to see if you would knock first." Alex's breath hitched, their bodies still frozen in place, muscles locked as if bound by unseen hands, every nerve in their body screaming for them to run, to turn, to do anything. But the voice, that awful, whispering voice, had rooted them to the spot, its tone playful yet hollow, like a thing that mimicked speech but had no real understanding of it. The silence stretched unbearably, the air thick with something unseen, something watching, waiting for their next move. Alex forced themselves to swallow, their throat painfully dry, and finally, they turned, but the hallway behind them was empty. Or at least, it should have been. The walls looked wrong. They were shifting, stretching, breathing, their edges blurred like something was pressing against them from the other side, something not meant to be here. The old wooden floor beneath them, which had been covered in dust just moments ago, now bore fresh, wet footprints, leading toward them. Small at first, childlike, but growing in size with every step until they ended right at Alex's feet. The moment they noticed, the temperature plummeted, the very air tightening around their chest like an icy vice, and then, tap, tap, tap. A slow, deliberate knocking. Not from the door anymore, but from inside the walls. Alex stumbled back, their foot catching on something unseen, nearly sending them sprawling, but they caught themselves against the doorframe. their pulse hammering so violently they thought their ribs might crack beneath the pressure. The knocking grew louder, insistent. No longer just one set but many, dozens, maybe hundreds, all pressing against the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Let us in, let us in, let us in, let us in. The words weren't spoken but felt, carved into their thoughts like something ancient and starving, something that had been waiting far too long. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence was worse. Alex's breath came in short, shallow gasps, their skin clammy, their heartbeat erratic. The walls no longer moved, the footprints were gone, the air had returned to its unbearable stillness. For a moment, they almost believed it was over, until the door behind them swung open on its own. Not with a slow, ominous creak. Not with an ear-splitting crash. Just a quiet, effortless motion, as if someone had merely turned the handle and pushed it gently, welcoming them inside. The darkness beyond was absolute. Alex stepped back, every part of them screaming that if they looked too long, if they dared peer into that void for even a second longer, something would stare back. And then they heard it. A sound so soft, so fragile, it shouldn't have terrified them as much as it did. A baby's cry? Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Coming from the other side of the open door. The breath left Alex's lungs in a shaky, broken exhale, their entire body trembling. Their mind reeled, logic struggling against the overwhelming sense of wrongness pressing in from all sides. There was no reason, no possible reason, for a child to be here. This place was abandoned, forgotten. A structure left to rot in the middle of nowhere. And yet, the crying continued. Weak, pleading. As if the baby knew it was somewhere it shouldn't be. As if it was waiting for someone to come. For them to come. Alex's fingers curled against the doorframe, their nails digging into the splintered wood, grounding themselves, forcing back the rising tide of panic. Every ounce of self-preservation screamed at them to turn, to run, to never look back. But beneath the terror, beneath the unshakable certainty that whatever was in that darkness was not a child, there was something else. A pull? A terrible, quiet knowing that if they left, if they turned away now, they would hear that baby's cries in their head forever. They took a step forward. And the crying stopped. The silence rushed in so violently it felt like a physical force, pressing against Alex's skull, squeezing their ribs, thick and suffocating and long. And then the whisper came again, from the darkness beyond the door. Closer now. Right at their ear. You knock first. Alex's entire body recoiled, but their feet would not move. Their muscles locked in place as if unseen hands held them fast, the voice slithering through their thoughts like something alive, something that had been waiting, watching, lurking just out of sight for far too long, the weight of its presence pressing against their chest, making it impossible to breathe, impossible to think. And then the door that had opened so gently before now slammed shut behind them with a force that rattled the very walls, sealing them into the suffocating darkness, the air thick with something damp and stale, the scent of rot curling into their lungs, the silence stretching so tight around them that it felt like reality itself was on the verge of snapping, and then footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing from deep within the blackness, impossibly distant yet growing closer with each second, each soft thud vibrating in Alex's bones like the strike of a hammer against stone, their heartbeat quickening. To match the rhythm, their breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps as their fingers scraped against the rough wooden walls, searching for an exit, for anything, but the moment they reached forward, the floor beneath them shifted, not like wood but like something breathing, something shifting beneath their weight, and then the footsteps stopped, replaced by a different sound, something far worse, a quiet, wet, dragging, as though something was pulling itself closer. Something too heavy, too unnatural, and Alex knew, with an overwhelming certainty that turned their veins to ice, that if they looked, if they so much as glimpsed whatever lurked just beyond their sight, they would never leave this place, they would never be Alex again, but the darkness was pressing in, thick and alive, curling around their limbs, whispering in 1,000 voices that were not their own, and just when they thought they could endure it no longer, just when their mind teetered on the edge of snapping like brittle glass, the baby cried again, closer this time, so close it sounded as if it was right in front of them, and Alex felt their chest lurch with something primal, something instinctual, some deep, biological need to reach forward, to help, to protect, and yet their bodies screamed in protest, "Don't move, don't move, don't move," because somewhere, deep inside, they knew the truth. They knew that whatever was making that sound was not a baby, was not human, but the crying didn't stop, it only grew. More desperate, choked, pleading, and Alex's fingers twitched forward, their breath caught in their throat. Because what if for just one impossible moment it was real? What if a child was trapped in this place? What if leaving meant leaving something helpless to them, to whatever else was in this house? And the thought was unbearable, cutting deeper than any fear, and so against all reason, against the sheer, gut-wrenching terror threatening to consume them, Alex reached forward into the dark, their fingertips brushing against something soft, and in that instant the crying stopped, the air turned frigid, and the voice returned, no longer whispering, no longer distant, but right behind them, curling against the nape of their neck in a breath colder than death itself, laughing as it whispered, "Got you!" Alex's scream never left their throat because the second that voice slithered into their ear, the air around them collapsed, the darkness itself constricting like a living thing, wrapping around their limbs, their chest, their face, pressing into their skin like 1,000 unseen hands clawing their way inside, and in that instant, the thing they had touched, the thing that had felt soft, familiar, human, was no longer beneath their fingers, the weight of it shifting as if it had never been there at all, and yet the presence remained, thick, suffocating, impossibly close, the breath at their neck somehow sinking into them rather than coming from behind, inside their very bones, their mind fracturing under the sensation of something twisting into their thoughts, threading itself through their memories, like a parasite rewriting reality, and then, with a suddenness that sent their stomach plummeting, the floor gave way. Not like wood breaking, not like collapsing planks, but like a mouth opening, swallowing, and Alex felt their body lurch downward, weightless, falling into a depth that did not exist, a depth that had no bottom, no end, just an endless plunge into something unseen, unheard, a place where sound itself was devoured before it could be made, where time folded in on itself and unraveled all at once, and yet the worst part was not the falling, not the breathless descent into nothingness, but the fact that something was following, something was reaching, not with hands but with intention, with hunger, an unseen force curling around the edges of their being, sinking into their skin, peeling them apart at the seams as if unraveling who they were thread by thread, and Alex knew, with a terror so deep it burned, that if they hit the bottom, if there even was a bottom, they would not be Alex anymore, they would not be anything, they would be part of it, and so they thrashed, they screamed. They fought against the pull of gravity itself, against the pull of it. But the force only grew stronger, wrapping tighter, dragging them down, and just when the last thread of resistance slipped from their grasp, just when their bodies ceased to be their own, the falling stopped, the world snapping back into focus with a violent jolt, and they were no longer in the house, no longer in the dark, but somewhere else, somewhere impossibly wrong, the sky above them a swirling mass of black and red, the air humming with a sound too low to hear yet too loud to ignore, the ground beneath them neither solid nor liquid but something in between, shifting, pulsing, breathing, and when they turned, when they dared to look, they saw the child, the same one that had cried out, sitting just a few feet away, its face pale, its small hands clutching a torn blanket, and for a fleeting moment, hope surged in Alex's chest, a desperate, foolish belief that maybe, they had saved it, that maybe this was all a sick nightmare. But then the child lifted its head, its eyes locking onto Alex's with an expression that was not relief, not gratitude, not fear, but amusement, something ancient and knowing and so impossibly wrong that every muscle in Alex's body turned to stone. And then, in a voice that was not a child's, in a voice that did not belong to anything living, it smiled and whispered, "I was so hungry." Alex's breath caught in their throat as the child, or the thing that only looked like a child, tilted its head in a way that sent ice down their spine, its lips curling into something that was neither a smile nor a snarl, but something in between, something unnatural, something hungry, and before they could move, before they could react, the ground beneath them rippled like water, pulses of dark energy radiating outward from where the child sat. And suddenly Alex wasn't just standing anymore, they were sinking, their feet swallowed by the shifting surface, a coldness climbing up their legs like fingers wrapping around their flesh, pulling them downward, and they tried to struggle, tried to rip themselves free, but the more they moved, the deeper they sank, the substance thickening, solidifying around them like living cement, and all the while the child watched, its eyes dark pools that held something vast, something ancient, something that knew them in a way nothing should, something that was pulling apart every thought, every memory, twisting them, reshaping them, devouring them, and Alex tried to scream, tried to fight the thing in their mind that was pressing against their skull, but then the child reached out, one small hand unfurling from the tattered blanket, and with just a flick of its fingers, the sinking stopped, the ground beneath them hardening instantly. But the relief was short-lived because now Alex was trapped, bound in place, unable to move, and the child, or the thing wearing a child's face, began to stand, slow and deliberate, dusting off its tiny hands as if it had all the time in the world, and as it stepped forward, its bare feet making no sound against the impossible ground, the air itself seemed to close in, pressing against Alex's chest, suffocating, crushing. And then the whisper started, not from the child, not from any one direction, but from everywhere. A chorus of voices speaking in hushed, fragmented words, overlapping, twisting together, some sounding human, others like nothing Alex had ever heard, and their hearts slammed against their ribs, panic clawing at their throat as they realized the voices weren't coming from outside, they were coming from inside, burrowing into their skull, threading themselves through their thoughts, turning memories into things with teeth. And then the child was right in front of them, inches away, looking up with wide, dark eyes that swallowed every flicker of light. And when it spoke again, its voice was wrong, layered, echoing, like 1,000 mouths speaking at once. "You brought me here." Alex's stomach twisted, the weight of those words pressing against them, smothering them, because somehow, in some way, they knew it was true, they had brought it here, or maybe they had been brought here for it, and as the thing pretending to be a child reached out and pressed one small, freezing hand against Alex's chest, they felt it, the unraveling, the pulling, the sensation of something reaching inside, not for their body, but for them, for whatever made them Alex. And as their vision blurred, as the world around them seemed to fold inward, they saw the truth, they saw what was behind the child's eyes, what was waiting in the dark beyond this place, what had been waiting for them, and as their mouth opened in a silent scream, the whispers grew deafening, the darkness surged forward, and the last thing Alex heard before everything turned to nothing was the child's voice, soft, mocking, endless. "I was so hungry." Alex's consciousness didn't fade into blackness, but instead shattered into 1,000 shifting fragments, each piece reflecting something impossible, memories twisting like living things, places they had never been, voices they had never heard, all folding into them, through them, tearing them apart and remaking them at the same time, and then suddenly they were somewhere else, standing on a floor that wasn't solid but felt more real than anything they had ever known, the air thick and humming, like a living thing pressing against their skin, their breath uneven, too loud, too slow, and as they turned, trying to make sense of the space around them, the child was still there but different now, taller, its limbs elongated, its skin stretched too tight over bones that didn't fit, its eyes deeper, darker, endless voids pulling Alex in, and it smiled, not with its mouth, but with its entire being. something vast and ancient curling at the edges of reality. As it stepped closer, the weight of its presence making Alex's knees buckle, their body refusing to move as it reached out again, its fingers just barely brushing their arm, and suddenly the space around them cracked, a web of fractures spreading in all directions, revealing glimpses of something else, something underneath, something watching, waiting, shifting in the spaces between, and Alex felt it then, the horrible realization that they weren't just trapped here. They were becoming part of it, the boundaries of their mind. Unraveling, stretching, absorbing the whispers that never stopped, that dug deeper and deeper into the core of them, rewriting what it meant to be Alex. And as they tried to scream, to force themselves free, the child's voice came again, but this time it wasn't speaking to them, it was speaking through them, their own mouth forming the words they didn't choose. "You are home now." And with that final utterance, the last pieces of Alex that still belonged to them dissolved into the dark. The words echoed inside Alex's head, reverberating through their skull like 1,000 voices speaking at once, not outside, not from the child, but from within, as if their very thoughts were no longer their own, the weight of something vast and unknowable pressing down on them, wrapping around their mind like tendrils of shadow that slithered into every crevice of their being, and they tried to resist, tried to pull away, to remind themselves of who they were, where they had been, but every memory slipped like water through trembling fingers, distorted, rewritten, faces they should have known morphing into strangers, places shifting into landscapes that had never existed, and beneath it all, a rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat that wasn't theirs but was somehow inside them, syncing with their own, twisting their very essence into something other, something wrong, and the child, or what had once been a child, only watched, its hollow eyes pulling Alex deeper into the abyss of its gaze. Its body no longer still but shifting, elongating, breaking apart and reforming in ways that defied understanding, each movement a grotesque mimicry of something almost human, and then it laughed, or maybe it was the sound of the world around them laughing, the air itself vibrating with the sickening melody of something ancient and hungry, and Alex realized then that they had never been alone, not truly. That the thing watching from the cracks, from the void beyond sight, had always been there, waiting, whispering, shaping them from the moment they had stepped into this place, and as the fractures in reality widened, revealing glimpses of writhing figures, hands stretching through the rifts, grasping, reaching, Alex felt their bodies seize, muscles locking in place as if unseen hands now held them too, the voices inside growing louder, overlapping, a cacophony of secrets and horrors they couldn't shut out, and then the child, or the thing that had worn the child's form, took another step, lifting a hand that dripped with something thick and black, a substance that moved like it was alive, tendrils coiling, waiting, and Alex wanted to scream, but no sound came, only that steady heartbeat, not theirs, never theirs, growing stronger, consuming them from within, and they knew then that this wasn't just a place, it was a living thing, a being that had no beginning and no end, a presence that had existed long before they had stepped into it, and would exist long after they were gone. And as that darkness reached for them, as they felt their minds splintering further, the last thing they saw before the world swallowed them whole was their own reflection staring back from the abyss, smiling. But just as the abyss seemed ready to consume them, just as the tendrils of darkness wrapped around their limbs, tightening like a vice, Alex felt something shift, something deep within the core of their being, a flicker of something that did not belong to this place, something real, something human. A memory, no, a feeling, ripped through the chaos, cutting through the cacophony of voices in their head. It was warmth, the sensation of sunlight on their skin, the laughter of someone they once loved, the scent of home, of earth, of rain. It was a defiance that surged against the darkness, a refusal to be unmade. And in that moment, the child, no, the thing wearing the child's face, hesitated. Its hollow eyes narrowed, as if it sensed the shift, as if it feared it. Alex seized upon that hesitation, forcing themselves to move, muscles screaming against the invisible force holding them in place. The heartbeat that had not been their own faltered, skipping, unsteady. The tendrils loosened. A breath, Alex's breath, rushed into their lungs, sharp and ragged, a gasp that felt like drowning in air. The world around them wavered, the fractures in reality flickering between what was and what could be. The figures in the void shrank back, their whispers turning into a keening wail. The child thing opened its mouth, and for the first time, Alex saw something in its gaze that almost resembled fear. It reached for them again, but Alex pushed back, not with their hands, not with their body, but with something else, something it had no power over. The truth. This is not real. The thought slammed through the space between them, rippling like a shockwave. The shadows recoiled, the tendrils retracting, and the child's form twisted violently, its skin cracking, peeling, revealing something underneath that was not flesh, not human, something ancient and writhing, something that should never have been given a form. The ground beneath them trembled. The space around them splintered, jagged lines of blinding light cutting through the dark. The air was filled with the howling of the void, of things unseen and unknowable, of the thing before them, as it let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but felt like one. It lurched forward, desperate, but Alex did not move. They stood firm, feet planted, heart pounding to a rhythm that was only their own. They saw now what the creature had tried to make them forget, who they were, what they had lost, what they still had to fight for. And with that final surge of defiance, they pushed. The world around them shattered. Blinding light swallowed everything. Silence followed. And then, Alex was standing on solid ground. The air smelled of pine, damp earth, of something unmistakably real. The oppressive weight of the place was gone, the whispers nothing more than whine through the trees. Their chest heaved, their body aching as if they'd been fighting for days. But they were here. Alive. Whole. And then they heard it. A sound so small, so fragile, that it nearly broke them. A whimper. Their heads snapped toward it, toward the edge of the clearing, where a tiny form lay curled in the dirt. The child. The real one. Not the thing that had taken its shape. Alex stumbled forward, falling to their knees, hands shaking as they reached out, fearing, please, please, but then, a breath. A soft, warm exhale against their fingers. The child stirred, eyelids fluttering, tiny fingers curling into Alex's sleeve. Alive. Safe. Alex pulled them into their arms, holding tight, grounding themselves in the weight of the small body, in the warmth of real skin, of real breath. They didn't know how they had escaped, what force had pulled them back from the brink. But it didn't matter. They were here. They had one. And whatever had lurked in that place, whatever had tried to take them, it knew now. It would not forget. And neither would Alex. The ground beneath Alex's feet seemed to tremble, a faint, unsettling hum reverberating through the air as they held the child close, the tiny body warm and alive in their arms. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed, like they were still standing on the edge of that dark void, the oppressive weight of something ancient and hungry hanging just behind them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft, steady rhythm of their own breathing. But something was off. It wasn't over. It couldn't be. The trees around them stood like silent sentinels, casting long shadows in the fading light. The scent of pine and earth hung thick in the air, but underneath it, there was a faint, metallic tang, something that didn't belong. A chill prickled across the back of Alex's neck, and for the first time since they had crossed into this twisted place, they felt truly alone. The child stirred in their arms, nuzzling against them, but Alex's grip tightened instinctively, unwilling to let go, unwilling to trust that this moment of peace was real. The shadows began to stretch longer, as though they were reaching, pulling towards them, and the faint humming grew louder, like a distant whisper, just beyond the edges of hearing. Alex's heart skipped a beat, and they glanced around, scanning the quiet woods for any sign of danger. But there was nothing. No movement. No eyes watching from the dark corners. Just the sound of their own heartbeat pounding in their ears. And then, there it was. A flicker. In the corner of their eye. Something shifting between the trees, just at the edge of their vision. Alex's breath caught in their throat, and the world seemed to tilt. The child in their arms whimpered softly, sensing the sudden change, and Alex held them tighter, taking a step back, every muscle in their body tensed in readiness. The silence returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was an ominous calm, like the world was holding its breath. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow was gone, slipping away into the trees, vanishing into the darkening landscape. Alex blinked, heart hammering, unsure if what they had seen was real. But the feeling lingered, cold and unsettling, like the calm before a storm. For a moment, they thought about turning back, running, but the child in their arms needed them. They needed each other. Whatever was out there, whatever had brought them to this point, wasn't going to stop. It would follow. But Alex wasn't running anymore. They had come too far, fought too hard to survive, and they weren't about to let the darkness claim them now. The shadows in the trees shifted again, but this time, Alex didn't look away. They held their ground. The child's grip on them tightened, as if sensing the rising tension. Alex took a deep breath, steadying themselves, and finally spoke, their voice firm despite the trembling in their chest. "We're not running anymore." The forest seemed to hold its breath, the distant hum of the unknown still lingering in the air, but there was something else now, something that hadn't been there before. A new resolve, a promise made in the face of the growing darkness. And then, with a slow, deliberate step forward, Alex moved deeper into the woods. The shadows followed, but they weren't afraid anymore. They couldn't afford to be. Not now. With every step, the air seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if the very ground beneath Alex was thickening, shifting. The shadows swirled around them, dark tendrils reaching out like grasping fingers, but Alex didn't stop. They couldn't. The child in their arms, now quiet, clung to them, trusting, unaware of the nightmare that had begun to unfold around them. Alex felt the weight of that trust, the responsibility pressing harder with each passing second. They had come too far to turn back, to give up, to let the darkness swallow them whole. The woods around them seemed endless, the trees stretching higher and higher into the sky, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers clawing at the pale evening light. The strange hum still lingered in the distance, almost like a siren's call, low and vibrating in the air, but it wasn't the sound that terrified Alex. It was the silence in between. The stillness that hummed like a shroud, suffocating. Every crack of a twig beneath their boots, every gust of wind that made the trees groan, felt like an alarm, a warning, a reminder of how small they were in this vast, suffocating world. A sudden, sharp noise pierced the silence. A twig snapped. Alex froze, every muscle in their body tightening, heart racing. The child stirred, tiny hands grasping at their shirt, sensing the shift in energy. Slowly, Alex turned their head, scanning the area around them, eyes flicking over the trees, the underbrush, the spaces between the trunks. But there was nothing. The forest was as still as it had been moments before. Then came the sound again. Closer this time. A soft rustle of movement, like something, or someone, was out there, just beyond the veil of their vision. Alex felt their pulse quicken, adrenaline flooding their veins. They knew they weren't alone, but the question was, who, or what, was watching them? Was it the same thing that had been haunting them from the moment they stepped into this forsaken place? Was it the forest itself, alive, breathing, watching, waiting? The possibilities spun in Alex's mind, each darker than the last, until they could barely catch their breath. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the rustling stopped. The silence returned, deep and suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Alex swallowed hard, trying to steady themselves. The child was still in their arms, eyes wide, sensing the fear that Alex couldn't shake. They looked down, meeting the child's gaze, and in that moment, something inside Alex snapped. They couldn't afford to be afraid anymore. They had to protect this little life, to keep moving forward, to make it through this, whatever this was, together. "Come on!" Alex whispered to the child, more to themselves than to the small, trusting face looking up at them. "We're almost there." With renewed determination, they moved forward. Every step felt like it took them deeper into the unknown, further from the safety they had once known. The trees loomed closer now, their branches crowding around them, blocking the last rays of twilight from reaching the forest floor. The air grew colder still, the oppressive hum more intense, vibrating in their chest, as if the very heart of the forest was beating in time with theirs. And then, just when Alex thought they couldn't take another step, they saw it. Through the trees, a flicker of light, a soft, almost ethereal glow. Their heart leapt in their chest, a surge of hope rising within them. Was it an exit? A way out? Or was it just another illusion, another trick of the darkness designed to lure them in deeper? They had to know. Alex pushed forward, the child held tightly against their chest, their pace quickening, their breath coming faster as they neared the light. The shadows seemed to retreat as they drew closer, the oppressive atmosphere lifting just slightly. The light grew brighter, more defined, and Alex dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were about to find their way out of this nightmare. But when they broke through the last line of trees, the light revealed something else entirely. There was no way out. Instead, in the center of a small clearing, stood a stone altar, ancient and covered in moss, its surface cracked and weathered with time. The air around it hummed, vibrating with an energy Alex couldn't comprehend. On the altar, beneath a veil of mist, lay something that shimmered faintly, a small, intricately carved box. The air around it felt charged, almost alive, like the very earth itself was holding its breath. And then Alex understood. This was why they had been brought here. This was why the shadows had followed them, why the hum had haunted their every step. It wasn't about running away. It was about this. About the box. Something was calling them, something dark and ancient, and it was waiting for them to make the final choice. Alex stood frozen, the child in their arms suddenly heavier, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. The shadows seemed to close in, the hum growing louder, and for a moment, Alex felt the pull of the darkness. The forest seemed to exhale, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. The child stirred in their arms, tiny fingers reaching for the box, and Alex knew that they had no choice. No way out. They had come too far. With a trembling hand, they reached for the box. And in that instant, everything went silent. The forest fell still. The child went quiet. And in the heart of the darkness, something watched them, waiting.